Alright, so in this problem, I have x to the power of x to the power of 3 is equal to 729. So for my solution, I obviously want to find the value of x. So I'm going to start by taking the power of 3 on both sides. So now I have x to the power of x to the power of 3 to the power of 3 is equal to 729 to the power of 3. Now, if I have something in the form a to the power of m to the power of n, this is equal to a to the power of m times n. And for a to the power of m times n, this is the same thing as a to the power of n times m. I can switch these two places. Meaning, if a to the power of m times n is equal to a to the power of m to the power of n, then a to the power of n times m, this is equal to a to the power of n to the power of m. So this means that a to the power of m to the power of n is equal to a to the power of n to the power of m. So right here we have x to the power of x to the power of 3 to the power of 3, and we can think of x to the power of 3 as m and 3 as n. So this is the same thing as x to the power of 3 to the power of x to the power of 3. And this is equal to 729 to the power of 3. Now, 729 is the same thing as 9 to the power of 3. So now I have x to the power of 3 to the power of x to the power of 3 is equal to 9 to the power of 3 to the power of 3. And remember again, if I have something in the form a to the power of m to the power of n, this is equal to a to the power of m times n. So 9 to the power of 3 to the power of 3, that's going to equal 9 to the power of 3 times 3, which is equal to 9 to the power of 9. So now I have x to the power of 3 to the power of x to the power of 3 is equal to 9 to the power of 9. And now if I have something in the form a to the power of a is equal to b to the power of b, this means that a is equal to b. So in this case, x to the power of 3 is equal to 9. Now to solve this, all I have to do is take the cube root on both sides. So now I have the cube root of x to the power of 3 is equal to the cube root of 9. And the cube root of x to the power of 3 is equal to x, so I have x is equal to the cube root of 9. Alright, so in this problem, I have x to the power of x to the power of 77 is equal to 77. So I obviously want to find the value of x for this problem. So for my solution, I'm going to first start by taking the power of 77 on both sides. So now I have x to the power of x to the power of 77 to the power of 77 is equal to 77 to the power of 77. Now, if I have something in the form a to the power of m to the power of n, this is the same thing as a to the power of m times n, right? And a to the power of m times n, this is the same thing as a to the power of n times m. They're both the same thing, it doesn't matter the order. So now, if a to the power of m times n is equal to a to the power of m to the power of n, then this means that a to the power of n times m is equal to a to the power of n to the power of m. And because all of these equal each other, this means that a to the power of m to the power of n is equal to a to the power of n to the power of m. So over here we have x to the power of x to the power of 77 to the power of 77, and we can think of x to the power of 77 as m and 77 as n. So now, remember, this is the same thing as I can switch these two places. So now I have x to the power of 77 to the power of x to the power of 77 is equal to 77 to the power of 77. Now I'm going to let x to the power of 77 equal to the variable y. So now if I substitute in y for x to the power of 77, I get y to the power of y is equal to 77 to the power of 77. Now, if I have something in the form a to the power of a is equal to b to the power of b, this means that a is equal to b. So in this case, y to the power of y equals 77 to the power of 77. This means that y equals 77. And remember how we let x to the power of 77 equal y. So now I have x to the power of 77 is equal to 77. So to solve this, I'm going to take the power of 1 over 77 on both sides. So I have x to the power of 77 to the power of 1 over 77 is equal to 77 to the power of 1 over 77. So I get x is equal to the 77th root of 77. Alright, so in this problem, I have x to the power of x to the power of 5 is equal to 100. So to solve this, I'm going to start by taking the power of 5 on both sides. So now I have x to the power of x to the power of 5 to the power of 5 is equal to 100 to the power of 5. Now, if I have something in the form a to the power of m to the power of n, this is the same thing as a to the power of m times n. And a to the power of m times n, that's the same thing as a to the power of n times m. We can switch the places of these two. Now, if a to the power of m times n is equal to a to the power of m to the power of n, then this means that a to the power of n times m, this must equal a to the power of n to the power of m. And because all of these are equal to each other, this means that a to the power of m to the power of n is equal to a to the power of n to the power of m. So over here, we have x to the power of x to the power of 5 to the power of 5, and we can think of x to the power of 5 as m and 5 as n. So if I switch those two places, I get x to the power of 5 to the power of x to the power of 5 is equal to 100 to the power of 5. Now 100, I'm going to rewrite that as 10 squared. So now I have x to the power of 5 to the power of x to the power of 5 is equal to 10 squared to the power of 5. And this is the same thing as x to the power of 5 to the power of x to the power of 5 is equal to 10 to the power of 10. Now, if I have something in the form a to the power of a is equal to b to the power of b, this means that a is equal to b. So x to the power of 5 is equal to 10, meaning x is equal to the 5th root of 10.